this period. This rapid escalation in social media adoption highlights its role in our lives. On average, internet users spend about 151 minutes on spending, messaging apps, and also social media. This significant increase from previous years positions social networking sites as a pivotal channel for engaging the youth in important global conversation, particularly in the realm of sustainable development goals. The implications of these studies are profound. The digital era has seen that the transformation of social media from a platform that we can just collaborate and talk into something that is actually important and a tool that we can actually change the world. Young people, the primary users of these platforms, are not just passionate consumers of content, but also they are potential catalysts for change. By tapping into this digital domain, we can amplify the message of SDGs to an audience that is not only vast, but also ready to engage and act. Going back to SDG 60, which advocates for peace, justice, and also strong institutions, we find a unique opportunity. The presence of assets in the daily lives of youth offers a direct channel to inform, inspire, and even mobilize them towards this goal. Collaborating with popular SNS platforms, we can launch campaigns that resonate with the youth, educating them on the importance of SDG 16 and how they can contribute at it. Such campaigns could range from interactive discussions and challenges to collaborative projects, all tailored to make SDG 16 more approachable and also relatable. Moving on to the influence of social media. Did you know that about 2/3 of American teenagers follow influencers on social media? This figure is substantially higher than the 29% of American adults who do the same. This data highlights the powerful impact influencers have on the younger generation. Imagine the potential that influencers have in providing and supporting SDGs. By collaborating with these influencers, we can tap into the vast reach and influence the engagement in sustainable development goals, particularly SDG 60, which focuses on peace, justice, and also strong institutions. Last and most important, speak up. Post SDG 60 related news and opinions on your SNS. Talk about it to your mom, your dad, your friends, and even your teachers. The more you talk about it, the more the world becomes aware about it. Don't be afraid to express your own opinion. Speak up and you will change the world.
Here's our work started. As we come to the close of our journey through the landscape of the global youth involvement in the sustainable development 16, we've seen the remarkable strides that young people have actually taken and the making worldwide. From these passionate activists in South Korea who have played a pivotal role in shaping their nation's paths toward the peace and justice, to the global initiatives like the Youth Forward initiatives, which are empowering the young voices in their international era. Today, we also have witnessed how youth across different geographies are united by a common purpose to create a world where justice prevails, peace is born, and inclusive institutions are not just aspirations rather than real. South Korea and our global citizens, vibrant young movements, have shown the power of the collective action, mirroring the global movement towards achieving sustainable development goals. The journey has started over. The involvement of the young people in the peace building, justice, and institutional reform is not just beneficial, but essential for sustainable development. Their innovative perspectives that we have, their resilience that we gain, their determinations are the catalyst for change, bridging divides and fostering a culture of peace. Although the actions that Adrian has dropped out previously makes them insignificant, I would like to reiterate. Talk to them. Talk to your mom, talk to your friends, talk to your dad, whatsoever. Please go to the action. I would like to finish my presentation. Thank you. I would like to call the floor for the Q&A. Is there any? Yes?
So thank you for your presentation. It's really insightful. I just would like to ask, the current Russian and Ukraine conflict is ongoing, and it is a massive going against the SDG 16. And I'm just asking, how would you ensure, if you were the UN, how would you ensure that your proposed solutions are able to solve the direct conflict with a direct impact?
Thank you for asking. If I understood it right, the question that you're asking is the ongoing Ukrainian conflict that is taking place in Russia right now, and how the youth will actually take out an action to resolve the conflict. So, my answer is consistent. As we have previously elaborated in our call to action, we have to speak it up. How it is because we are not actually decision makers like a PT and the United Nations Security General per se. But however, what we can do is to just speak up. Speak up that there's the people that out there dying outside of the Ukraine and including the Israel current conflict that is taking place right now. Although we may not have an authority to make a direct change in global affairs, we can just speak it up. Further questions?
Sorry, my question was not clear. I think you misunderstood. I was just asking that you're providing solutions that will spread information, spread youth to spread information and advocate their stance. But do you really think that just spreading and advocating without any enforcement of legally binding laws from UN will actually help solving the Ukraine and Russian conflict that we're just witnessing?
I'm not here to start an argument, but to say, the actual decision makers is not making any progress in the current conflict that is taking place in Ukraine right now. The Security Council's resolution is not currently binding. It's because Russia has utilized their veto power, in fact, to actually insist in the conflict. However, what we can do as the UN further elaborates is to speak up and raise the awareness of the young generation so that in order to avoid and circumvent the conflict that will take place otherwise. However, as we being the not actual decision makers and peace builders, however, what we emphasize in our presentation is that we can raise the awareness. Imagine, what if the young people do not stand out talking about their stances? Imagine what we're not talking about in TikTok to actually call our attention into the people dying outside. Nothing will happen. The authorities will do what they do. The young people's participation is itself significant because it raises awareness and it will prevent the future conflict that would happen otherwise. Any questions related to the speech content? Then I will hereby end our presentation. Thank you.
Right, thank you Team 1 for supporting young people's participation in peace building and suggesting action plans for youth, the main audiences, and the agents of change. Now I would like to give the floor to Team 2 reporting our progress on Sustainable Development Goal, especially focusing on Goal 4, quality education.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are Team 2, Haeram Yang,
Hyun Pyun from Hankook Academy of Foreign Studies.
And Yuli in Asia Pacific International School.
and Yusa Choi from Eva Girls Foreign Language School. While participating in the journey with Hope to the Future, the YMUN, and the UN education, our teammate used to feel skeptical about the current status of the whole world compared to the UN or compared to the prestige of the UN. So our team explored whether it has achieved as much as the initial goal after the UN set the SDGs. Among them, as a high school students in Korea, we focused on researching the value of quality education that students around the world deserve. So based on our research, Team 2 is going to inform about why the United Nations failed and a possible solution to achieve the goal of the number 4 quality education that our team envisioned.
Before jumping into our presentation, it is important to understand the big picture, similarities, and the differences between two goals that highlighted the 21st century. Do you know the difference between Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals? Analysis of statistics and data seems to suggest that the global world is falling short of achieving its goals by 2030, similar to the situation with the MDG. The United Nations has no way to enforce policy to achieve its goals and is entirely dependent on the national governments. This calls for a very disorganized and very inefficient process in working to achieve the goals. The Millennium Development Goals were first put into place in the year 2000 with the intent of ending poverty all around the world. SDGs were first put into place in 2015, also by the United Nations, and these goals succeed the Millennium Development Goals with the intent of ending poverty. However, the SDGs build further onto the goals of the Millennium Development Goals in the sense that they try to make human development more sustainable. But data suggests that, as we mentioned, data suggests that SDGs are falling short of achieving their goals by 2030. So how would we prove this? So the data that proves that SDGs are falling short is that MDGs and SDGs seem strangely similar to one another. Because that MDGs were not achieved during its initial period, and now they are re-established as SDGs with changed names. For example, MDG 1, which is eradication of poverty and hunger all over the world, is now in the SDGs as SDG 1, no poverty, and SDG 2, zero hunger. This presentation focuses on SDG 4, quality education, which, in line with the previous example, is similar to MDG 2, achieving global universal primary education. Our presentation aims to discuss the world's current underachievement in quality education, dividing it into 4 parts: income, gender, refugees, and development. Furthermore, we seek to offer possible solutions and insights to solve the issue. As high school students who experience education every day, we believe quality education is very important to the SDGs.
Now let's take a look at the correlation of pursuing private education and household income. For this section, our team was able to provide how private education expands the gap between high-income households and low-income households and the following households. To point out, these statistics are about national relative poverty. National relative poverty to dramatically present how high-income households have different quality of education from lower income households. As you can see from this slide, you will be able to see the direct positive correlation of more cost you put into the education, the better outcome you get. This type of aspect clearly stands out to the countries that are more reliant on capitalism. So first, let us see some statistics from countries we have been used to, America and Korea. This is the graph of average university acceptance rate by households. As you can see on the graph, it increases by 2.2 times higher at the top 90% percentile of America. Especially these trends are followed by top Ivy schools, as you can see from the graph on the right side, as the left side too. So let's go into the specifics where we can view on the top American prestigious universities. Princeton. Move on to the next slide. Thank you. According to this graph, this is the data from Princeton undergraduate students, class of 2015 to 2018, who graduated high school in New York City. According to the graph, 62% of high school students are from private schools. Even though the rest of the other students are from public high schools, it is shown that 21% of these students came from certain prestigious high schools in New York, and 9% of them came from selective public high schools. This phenomenon does not only apply to America, but Korea as well. Move on to the next slide. The blue bar represents the fifth income quartile, which is like the top 20%, and the yellow bar represents the first income quintile, which represents the bottom 20%. As household income increases, it has spent approximately 6 times more expenses into private education and more probability to get accepted to four-year college than the first income quintile. This clearly demonstrates that expenses give more opportunity for education, while below 20s acquire less. Move on to the next slide. Moving on to the causes of why these tragic phenomena had happened. First of all the generations that have gone these phenomena are Gen Z and millennials. In economics, the great economic crisis happened in the 20th century and 21st centuries, while generation only faced mainly one or two crises. The millennials and Gen Zs have gone through 3 crises, adding on to the greatest lockdown happened during COVID-19. This graph has shown not only economic crisis, but they have been faced through due to the rapid GDP growth caused by advancement of technology and population. The average global education education have been rapidly increased. According to the chapter 1, education and economic outcomes of among the young, 34% of millennials have finished a bachelor's degree, while other generations have finished less than 30%. Because of such educational inflation, people with a higher degree of education become more beneficial than the ones who have a lower degree of education. So on, it's affected to the people who only has high school diplomacy or even lower. On to the next slide. The essential way to eliminate the gap between high income households and low income households is to give privilege to the lower income households. Job training program education is one of the solutions that we can offer. According to Brookings Education, the U.S. government provided a job training program in 2015 to people from lower income households by including Workforce and Innovative Act. As a result, it succeeded in both groups, lower incomes and higher incomes. Move on to the next slide. So we will be talking about gender inequity by Yuli.
Thank you. Gender also plays a big role in unequal distribution of education opportunities. Women have more chance of being biased against, harming the right of equal opportunities. The social bias of women's roles are hindering them from approaching some areas of interest, such as STEM, which is science, technology, education, and mathematics. Only a third of the total STEM majors or expertise population was consisted of women. A sizable increase from the past, but still not enough to call it inclusive and quality, equal education opportunities. Also, the general statistics on education of women are not hopeful. So from 2016 to 2018, female primary education enrollment rate actually went down by 1 percentage point. this time period is exactly the time period when the SDGs were first implemented into action. So this sudden change of decrease in the enrollment rate seems to suggest that SDGs are not very helpful in increasing quality education. The female secondary education enrollment rate was stationary, just hovering over 48%. The SDG number 4 seeks to find balance between male and female education, most ideally at 50%, but 50% for both groups. However, the percentage going down or being stationary show that the SDGs are not very efficient in achieving these goals. So vocational pupils. Vocational pupils are students who seek to become merchants, tradespeople, or skilled workers in the future. So female secondary vocational pupil rate is basically the percentage in which out of all the vocational pupils, the percentage of women. From 2000 and to 2009, the vocational pupil rate actually increased from 44.75% to 45.5%. This is the time period of the Millennium Development Goals, right after it was established. However, right after 2009, as you can see from the red dot on the graph, it met a steep decline, falling 1.5 percentage points to 44%. And there was another decline in 2015, right after the SDGs were established, falling onto 42% in 2018. Again, this data seems to suggest that really SDGs were even less successful than Millennium Development Goals. So this brings about concerns of how to make SDGs more efficient in its work. And my our final point in gender inequality is women with no self-development. What this means is that women who is not in training or education or employment. So they're basically not doing anything. Basically, they're just taking care of the households. So female youth not in training, education, or employment in Afghanistan, which is the highest in the World Bank database, is reached 81.2%. In Yemen, it was 69.2%. What this data suggests is that in Afghanistan, 4 out of 5 female youth are not working. Male youth not in training, education, or employment is 45.5% in Kiribati and 22.1% in Yemen. A very small amount compared to the female youth not in training. This gender inequality is very concerning to our group because SDG 4 seeks to equalize this inequality, but from a present point of view, it's not very successful. Now moving on to solution. Our team's gender inequality solution has 3 parts: propaganda, funding, and action. So first, propaganda. People don't sympathize with a certain group until they realize that the mentioned group has direct relation to themselves and their livelihood. So calculating the effect of women's education on GDP per capita for each nation is a way to help people recognize its importance. We use the effect of US. A 1% increase in women's education rate calls for $230 increase in GDP per capita in the US. Not a lot of money for some people, but it may become a lifesaver for other people. And another propaganda solution is adding a category to UNDISA's e-governmental survey, which is a survey done every 2 years and is planned to do another this year in 2024. We can add a category that deals with women's interests or areas of interest or major so that we can recognize what the women want to actually do in the world. Second, funding. So in order to do all of these goods, we need money. So we need to work with other UN branches, non-governmental organizations, and other nations' governments to get the necessary funding. So UN branches, this is the easy part. UN Women is already taking part in gender equality to improve gender equality. And also UN Women's budget in 2023 is 204 million. So our team believes UN Women can contribute a significant amount to our project. NGOs, to get construction workers, we need to work with the Building Goodness Foundation, whose motto is to provide houses and schools to underprivileged people all over the world. And finally, governments. This one is a little more tricky, but Israel, Mexico, the Netherlands, and Norway is already funding a lot to gender equality. But governments need to take into account their nation's interests before they start giving out money. Therefore, our solution to this problem was governments that donate money to our project will be internationally recognized using the propaganda plan suggested before. We can now calculate how much the donation of a certain country affected the recipient country, and we can advertise it on our surveys and our propaganda plans. The third clause, and the final clause, is action. So we have the money, we have the data, now we need to act upon this problem. The country with most gender inequality was Somalia, calculated from the Gender Parity Index of education. Gender Parity Index is a ratio of men and women in a certain category. So it's in Somalia, tertiary education, it reached 0.25, which means that men in Somalia outnumbered women in universities by 4-1. So there was 4 times as many men than women in universities of Somalia. Therefore, using the information from the survey and the funding from the funding solution, we can now build schools in Somalia that relate to the majors that women wanted in the UNDESA survey. And we can now provide enough support to those women who want to learn and want to change the world. That was part 3, refugees and development.
Thank you. So during the war between Ukraine and Russia, many refugees are involved. Refugees encounter various difficulties, and one of the most significant disadvantages was the lack of education. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, also known as the UNHCR, many school-aged refugees are not getting the basic education they need in their life. So in order to tell us about the seriousness of this problem, the UNHCR has provided us with a few key facts about refugees and education. So more than half of the refugee students are not able to go to school. Currently, the number of refugees have risen by 50% in 2022, increasing up to 14.8 million refugees. This means that more than 7 million students are not able to go to school. So, and also, for example, the refugees from the Ukraine war, 1.85 million children were not able to go to school. And here are some reasons why the Ukraine students couldn't go to school. There were legal and language barriers, lack of information on available education system, hesitancy among parents to enroll children in the host country education system, and lack of capacity in the host country's schools. And also there's a steeper drop-off for the refugee students. As you can see, pre-primary education was 38%,
and it rose to 65% in primary school. However, the problem starts from secondary education, which is only 41%, and it also drops to 6% in tertiary education. And finally, there was a wide gap between gross enrollment between non-refugees and refugees. We can see that for non-refugees, the gross enrollment was 103%, and for females, it was 101%. However, for the refugees, the gross enrollment was 63% for males and 61% for females. The resolution 2601 from the UN states that emphasizes the need to facilitate the continuation of education in situations even in armed conflict. And this shows us a clear need for education for our refugees. So how do we solve this problem? There are two feasible ways we can do to solve this problem. First of them is raising funds. Many of the companies have already associated with the organizations under UN to help raise funds for refugees. And some of the examples are IKEA and Airbnb. For example, IKEA has partnered with UNHCR and has a project called Brighter Lives for Refugees, which they donated the earnings from selling light bulbs and standing lights, and they managed to raise up to $33.4 million. And the second solution is propaganda. Most of the people might have seen the video called Most Shocking Second a Day video by Save the Children. It shows us what kind of impacts a war can have to a child living in a safe country, and it also tells us that we can also be the refugees. So many of the problems has happened due to the isolation of refugees in host countries. So in order to make the gaps smaller, we can have interviews with the refugees and tell the people that the only difference between them and the refugees is that the refugees had to flee from their home. Now we will move on to the development.
Thank you. Now let's move on to the development part. In this part, we'll present about the countries that education policies and infrastructure are not provided in nature, and the possible solutions to ensure the students in those countries to have a stable education and improved educational environment. Next slide, please. Basically, the problem of education deficits at the political level occurs in these two cases. First one is developing countries with low GDP. And the other thing is countries with strong religion or dictatorships such as Saudi Arabia and Iran. In terms of GDP, our team found that the level of education infrastructure varies depending on GDP. For example, researchers at Georgia Institute Technology modeled the relationship with cross-sectional regressions and found a strong correlation between GDP per capita and universities. And the research suggests that a 10% increase in the number of universities in the region is related to about 0.4% higher GDP per person. Next slide, please. For another example, this world map shows the literacy rates in the world. As you can see, the slow development in the literacy rate is mostly among the developing countries that didn't join the Cold War between the US and Soviet Union in the 1960s. In this map, Chad, Mali, and South Sudan are the countries with the most literacy difficulty. Their GDP per capita standing at $814 as of 2022, which shows a sharp difference from the average of OECD members' GDP per capita for 2022 was $43,261. So these two resources show that the wealth of a country has a significant impact on the level of its educational infrastructure. So, what progress has the United Nations made on the poverty of education in the developing countries? To solve this problem, UNESCO and UNICEF have continued to improve education around the world through cooperation with local communities, innovation in educational curriculum, and improvement of educator capabilities. Even if there were the efforts of the UN at a particular case, our team could verify that the UN has not been very effective for equal education worldwide. For one case, UNICEF promoted the BREEZE project for the development of education in developing countries by expanding educational accessibility for Africa from 2010 to 2020. But as shown on the screen, the literacy of the representative countries, including South Africa and Zimbabwe, that applied the BREEZE project at that time, is showing very insignificant growth rates during the same period. So our team came up with one resolution which is closely related to fund and promoting. It's to hopefully encourage developed countries to increase their contributions to the International Development Fund, by example, thereby encouraging other countries to increase resources for equitable education. So this is the resolution to be promoted in the public relations aspect of funding, and it can serve as an opportunity to expand the infrastructure for the overall education. So in preparation for this presentation, our team wanted to clarify the limitations of the role of the UN. We believe that looking at how effectively the UN is working, which is the most powerful institution that has tried to promote the global security and ideals the world, is able to reflect on which direction that humanity should move now and in the future.
While preparing for the presentation, we looked through many resolutions passed by the UN. However, we saw very little evidence of actual action taken by the UN. Rather, it was just an advice to the international world. We recognize the limitations of the UN, which was that General Assemblies can only do so far as advising the international society or the Security Council. However, conflicting views of the world within the P5 Security Council and the abuse of powerful veto power has led to a very inefficient process to adapt resolutions, which are the only past resolutions that have legal binding power.
As a high school student looking at the role and quantity of the United Nations, we hope that this fundamental human problem will be solved. And this is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening. Is there anyone to ask a question, please?
So thank you for your lecture. I was really interested in the fact that you came up with data from Princeton that which showed that higher education meant better profession and higher salary. However, referring to the recent studies by Harvard and AI's revolution, it is stated that the risk of being displaced, which is substituted by AI in the realm of profession, is way higher for high salary workers as they're more intellectual and focused on gathering data. So how would your program ensure the job market when our society is going through ongoing industrial revolution with the current AI development?
Thank you for a wonderful question. As a point of view, AI is one of the areas of studies in computer science that is mainly taught in university. So to get a higher quality of education, going into prestigious university will be more beneficial than going to schools or any forms of education. So what I would say is to utilize AI program by getting a higher salaries. So it is a lot having a higher probabilities to probabilities to get higher salaries if you get accepted to universities or any prestigious institutions.
To add on to her answer, so the prestigious schools actually teach a lot of creativity and empathy because those two are the key things that AI will not be able to catch on in the human brain. Harvard recently took down their lectures because it was just putting in information into students, which AI does much better than humans. However, now they focus on projects and communication, which is part of the human nature that AI really won't be able to follow because AI is just a copy of human intelligence, and human intelligence has creativity and empathy. Thank you for your question.
And to add on what he said, like AI was invented in prestigious universities, so it will be better for everyone to be educated, educated or learning a source in AI. If you get accepted to private university, and we wanted to point out that actual education unfairness between low income households and high income households. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
If there are any other questions on the floor? Seeing none, we will conclude our presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for showing the interesting correlation of income, gender, habitats, and the state of development. Their creative point of view has been supported through a variety of statistics, especially from credible resources. So from now, I would like to take team 3 to the floor, covering population demographics in the Asia Pacific region.
The world is in danger, and it is now or never. Good morning, good evening to everyone. So we're group 4 with Jason Yang, Daniel Yu, Chan Ji-Yu, Kedrick. Tony. In the current world, there's many problems that are going on at this moment, even when we're looking at this presentation. And it is very crucial that as future leaders, we acknowledge and understand these problems so that we can create a solution for it and go against those problems so that we can advance humanity into a new realm, a sustainable one, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And not only that, but further on, bring humanity on a new. And thus, as future leaders, it is very important for us to also understand about the population and the humanity and who we are. So we'll be presenting about population demographics, specifically in the Asia Pacific areas.
So these are the table of contents. First of all, topic analysis. Second, problem. Third, research questions. Fourth, definition. Fifth, individual country analysis. Sixth, compare and contrast. Seventh, solutions. And eighth, implications.
So for the topic analysis, we're analyzing population demographic specifically in Asia Pacific area. And also our presentation is problem and solution driven, which means that we are going to identify a problem and suggest a solution for the problem. And also our perspective is SDG, which we take different SDG lenses to diverse perspective to target the issue of population demographics. And lastly, we apply real-world implications as solutions are made to make real-world solutions and for a better world. And that is the picture of Asia Pacific region. So if you guys have part of time understanding, that is the place that we're talking about. And we selected 10 countries to evaluate on their population demographics.
So the problem is declining an Asian population. The graph from the UN shows the population declining. The graph and the line in the graph symbolize the population growth, which is falling as the time goes by. There are four effects. First, increase in health costs for the elderly. Second, less workplace and more retirements. Third, vicious cycle of less and less younger generation. Fourth, unstable population trend. As a conclusion, the world faces population decline and aging population.
As for the research question that guided us through our research, we asked ourselves, what solutions can countries implement to solve and prevent population decrease? Next are some key definitions.
Before we move on to our presentation, we would like to provide our own definitions, which was officially stated by the credible sources to help your understandings. Population demographics, clearly stated by the National Geographic, is the social characteristics and statistics of the human population. Population pyramid, stated by the info.fr, is what represents the breakdown of the population by gender and age at a given point in range. Fertility rate, clearly stated by the OECD, is the total number of children that will be born to each woman. Lastly, mortality rate, shown by Britannica, is the ratio between the deaths and individuals in a specified population and during a particular time period.
We have 10 countries to analyze. The first country is People's Republic of China, which is located in East Asia. The population of China is 1.4 billion people, and the population expected in 2050 is 1.313 billion people, which is slightly decreasing. The second country is Republic of India, which is located in South Asia. The population is also 1.4 billion, and the population expected is 1.67 billion, which is stabilizing. The third country is Republic of Indonesia, which has population of 277.5 million, and the population expected is 300 million, which is stabilizing too. The fourth country is Japan, which is located in East Asia. The population of Japan is 123.3 million people, and expected population is 104.1 million. As the graph on the right, we can see that the younger generation population is decreasing. However, the elderly population are increasing, which is heading towards the Asian population. The fifth country is Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The location is in East Asia too, and the population is 26.2 million, and the expected population in 2050 is 25.8 million, which is decreasing.
The sixth country is the Republic of Philippines, which is located in Southeast Asia. Currently it has a population of 117.34 million, and it is expected to have a population of 157.89 million by 2050. Also, as you can see from the population pyramid, the younger generations are taking part of the most of the population. The seventh country is the Republic of Singapore, which is also located in the Southeast Asia. It has a population of 5.92 million, and it is expected to have a population of 6.4 million by 2050.
Also, the eighth country is the Republic of Korea, which is located in the East Asia. It has a population of 51.8 million, and it is expected to have a population of 46 million by 2050, which is decreasing. Also, the population is focused on the middle generation between the younger and the elder generations. The ninth country is the Kingdom of Thailand, which is located in the Southeast Asia. It has a population of 71.8 million, and it is expected to have a population of 65.94 million by 2050. This is also decreasing. Lastly, our country is the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, which is located in Southeast Asia. It has a population of 98.9 million, and it is expected to have a population of 100.7 million by 2050. And it has a stable population. Furthermore, as you can see from the population pyramid, younger and middle generations are evenly distributed, taking most part of the population.
Now, let's compare and contrast the countries that we've analyzed. So we divided the countries into three parts, with first one being stable countries, and second one stabilizing countries, and the last one being the declining countries. And we identify Singapore and Vietnam as stable countries, and Indonesia, Philippines, India as a stabilizing country, Thailand, China, and North Korea, South Korea, and Japan as a declining country. And here are the causes of problems.
We believe that the declining of population is a certain stage when you're developing a country, and it is inevitable, as all of the countries have to necessarily go through or in some day arrive at this stage in order to become a developed country. So we believe that there was a core problem or a common problem that is going on, and we believe that the three of them were fertility rates, policies and culture, and urbanization. First is low fertility and high mortality.
So low fertility rate and high mortality rate indicates that there are less births, however, the deaths are going high. So lower fertility rate and higher mortality rate causes decrease in population, and some causes for low fertility and high mortality are the cost of raising a child being unaffordable, as it is being costly to raise children, and second one being poor medical infrastructure system that is unable to save infants or mothers that are giving birth to children. And some related SDGs, as we learned, includes SDG 3, good health and well-being, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and SDG 11, sustainable city and community. And these SDGs are correlated with low fertility and high mortality, whether it is because of making the cost of raising child unaffordable or having the poor medical infrastructure system in those countries. Now, next to move on to the second one.
The challenges presented by policies and culture can be understood as follows. Destabilizing factors lead to lower birth rates, which eventually lead to a decrease in population. Now you might be wondering, what then are these destabilizing factors? These destabilizing factors are as follows. First, are irresponsible economic and demographic policies. Second, political instability and threats to peace. And third, gender inequalities that discourage population growth. Now, policies and culture broadly correspond to to the following SDGs. SDG 5, gender equality. SDG 16, peace, justice and strong institutions, and SDG 17, international cooperation. Next up is the issue of urbanization.
Third and last is urbanization. And urbanization is when workforce flows from the rural areas dispersed around the country into one specific major capital or multiple capitals. However, this is a very crucial problem as more and more people concentrate into a specific part of the country. The capital and the workspaces that allow people to work is concentrated in one area, meaning that in the rural areas, there isn't a lot of people living there. Which means that the inflow of the majority of citizens into a major capital city will result in lower birth rate in rural areas, and also the repetition of the problems that we saw on number 1 and number 2 causations. And the causation for urbanization is very complex, but to put it in simple context, it is concentration of capital in a particular city and the younger generations moving into the city in order to chase those capitals. And lastly, the elderly rates increasing in rural areas, making them less workable. And as for the solutions,
so there are 3 major solutions to fertility and mortality. The first one is the use of family planning, and the second one is the implementation of microloan system. And the last one is the renewal of immigration and refugee acceptance system. So to define family planning is planning about when and how to have families to control family size. So these countries that we presented that had declining population or low fertility rate or high mortality rate can implement family planning by the government to help the citizens to better plan their families to raise fertility rate and lower mortality rate. And it also has benefit in employment, as government will hire those workers for family planning to help to consult the citizens that needs those family planning support. And also, one issue that the world has currently is contraceptive method, which is to kill babies. However, when you implement family planning, just like seen in Brazil after 2010 when they implemented family planning system, their need for abortion or contraceptive method will highly decrease due to their better family planning. They will also benefit in that way. However, there are still cons, as the citizens will rely on government as they need when they manage their population and their family, and also it could be time consuming as the government has to implement a whole new system and apply the solution to their country. Next one is microloan. To define microloan is a small sum of money that is lent at low interest to new businesses or people. This is beneficial as government gives monetary support to people, which is directly related with a poverty issue for SDGs. And also, the citizens will have less dependency than the first issue, as they will lend money, as they will borrow money, pay back to the government, and develop their own businesses or own economical infrastructure. However, it can still be economically burdening to the country that provides microloan to their citizens, as they have to provide money to the citizens with low interest rate. Last one is the refugee and immigrants. So it is basically creating a better system for refugee and immigrants. Not only that it will help the family sizes or population in the country, it can also direct human rights issues by accepting refugees in their countries or maintaining the immigrant balance inside and outside the country. And also, it has different benefits in employment and economic growth, as the country will have more people to buy their goods, which will increase their GDP, and they can employ those refugees and immigrants into places that lack jobs and for providing service care to the elderly. And as I already said, it will provide services to the elderly, as more people from refugee and immigrants will be employed to the jobs to provide services to the elderly. And however, it can still have cultural issue, and it can have the loss of nationality, as you're accepting citizens from different countries that is not really your home. So now to move on to the policy recommendation.
To solve the issues presented by certain policies and cultural expectations, we have the following recommendations. First is to reform and revitalize labor rights and associated monitoring systems. This would help immigrants and women the most. While countries with declining populations usually have strong domestic labor laws, they are also home to lots of immigrant discrimination. This would discourage future immigration to these countries. For women, certain cultural norms, such as the motherhood burden, pushes them to prioritize economic stability over raising a family to the point of actually causing a drop in birth rates. Reforming and revitalizing labor rights and associated monitoring systems is important because it would allow for the effective use, the maximization of the use of women and immigrants to solve population loss. The second solution is the creation of a modernized UN framework for sustainable population growth and recovery. While the 1974 World Plan on Population does exist, it is an outdated document. The perspectives of countries like Japan, South Korea, and the entirety of the African continent had not properly been taken into account by them. Furthermore, the interconnected nature of today's world necessitates a comprehensive framework where awareness and expert knowledge can easily be shared. It is therefore paramount that a modernized UN framework forces to ensure proper international cooperation is created for sustainable population growth and recovery. Our last policy recommendation is the strengthening and the increase of accessibility to justice systems. The abuse of human rights and the lack of development leads to tension, terrorism, and eventually open conflict. Justice systems are the shield to the plague of war. By strengthening and increasing accessibility to justice systems on all levels would serve as a preventative measure to ensure the conditions for population growth can happen. Now, let's move on to solutions in regards to urbanization.
In order to design a solution for urbanization, we have to understand what urbanization is and why younger generations and workers are moving from rural areas into major cities. And to explain briefly about the urbanization cycle, we start with outflow from rural areas. People come outside of the rural areas and go into major cities to find themselves a job so that they can work. And as more and more people will move out of the rural areas, there is a concentration of capital in a specific major city. And capital and infrastructure needed for economic activities are concentrated in certain cities so that more and more people will actually go to the cities to find a job, meaning that there's less job opportunity in rural area and less capital in rural areas for people to work in. And now we come back to the start where there's an outflow of rural areas, thus people moving out of the rural areas again to the cities to look for jobs. So in order to stop urbanization and this vicious urbanization cycle, our main goal has to be redistributing the capital so that it is dispersed throughout the city evenly, so that people won't have to go to the cities to find the work, but there is somewhere to work inside the rural area or somewhere around them. A possible solution to that is tax incentives, infrastructure investment by the government, and affordable housing policy, along with creating an environment that people are willing to live. The first solution is tax incentives, where the company would incentivize private entities and private equity firms to put infrastructures around the countries, not instead of just one capital, but in dispersed and diverse areas so that people will be able to work in diverse cities. This is directly connected to decent work and economic growth, as more and more job places will be created through the placement of different infrastructures around the country. And also second is infrastructure investment, but the subject of the investments isn't the private entities, but it is the government. The government has to provide infrastructure and workplaces for people around the cities and around the country as a whole, which means that tax incentives and infrastructure investment to private entities that build new infrastructure in the rural areas will lead to more job opportunities all throughout the country. But however, there is one negative downside to it. It is that there is not enough motivation for the actual workers to move into the rural areas instead of just being able to work there. There needs to be education placed there for their children to go to school. There needs to be supermarkets and shopping malls and entertainment services so that their family can move in there and settle in as one of the citizens in the rural area. That is where the third solution comes into place: affordable housing policy and creating an environment so that citizens will be able to settle in. This is directly related to good health and well-being, SDG number 3, and quality education, SDG number 4. As in order to increase the attractiveness for the rural areas for younger generations to move in, there needs to be infrastructure, as mentioned, for education, like universities, middle school, high school, and elementary school, and also healthcare services so that they'll be able to get the necessary healthcare when they're in need, which will result in outflow of workers from actual major cities into different areas of the country when in collaboration with the solution 1 and 2, so that it will cover up the concept of the previous solution 1 and 2, which was that there was no incentives for the workers to move, but now there is clear incentives and motivation for the workers to move into the rural areas and settle in with their families. And as for the conclusion,
fertility and mortality rates, certain policies and cultural expectations, and urbanization present a challenge that leads to population loss. These issues present a multifaceted challenge, but we have also presented solutions that were equally so. We also presented the pros and cons with humanity at their very center. But if there was one thing that we would like the audience to come home with tonight, it would be the following. Populations are declining, and that's everyone's problem. No matter the demographics of your country, all countries need to work together to find ways to create a sustainable world with a stable population. This report focused on the perspective of countries with a declining population. Furthermore, it focused on the perspective of certain countries within the Asia-Pacific region. This does not mean, however, that the perspective of other countries should not be taken into account. On the contrary, there is power in diversity. In our global community, all voices must be heard on the issue of population and demographics for a progressive, sustainable, and stable future for us all.
So, stay alive and take action, because without life, none of the solutions matter. Nothing that we do matters. So first, take life as priority to develop the solutions, keep them in mind as global leaders, and to make population better so the world will be a better place to live. Thank you.
and now as our presentation has concluded, is there any questions for us?
First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting to listen to. I was actually very drawn to the idea of microloans in your solution for low fertility rates. But as you mentioned, also economic burdens are really hard on the government, especially the rapidly developing government, because they're seen as developed, but their economy is very weak. So it's gonna be a big burden on them to give out microloans that have very little interest. So how would the presenters convince government to give out microloans?
Okay, thank you for asking your question, and I'm very happy that you're thrown by my idea of microloan. To answer your question about rapidly developed countries which already has economical burden, yeah, that is true. Those countries, as of right now, already has economical burden. However, we should also look at long term, right? So if population problem continues to increase and there are less children to work and if there are less people to buy their products, their GDP will decrease and their employment will also decrease, right? And government can be helped by other governments, while citizens really lack support to support their family or start their own business. So microloan can be applied by the countries to help those individuals, and the country can be sustained by growing population sustainable population that were made by the micro world. Thank you, guys. Is there another question?
Yeah. I really agree. First of all, I really agree about the specific scenario. However, I don't really get how this could be done to other people. Maybe just probably they're used to their or what else? How this can really how this their own really
Not to what?
hurts our
Okay.
Thank you for your question. Her question, just for the sake of it, was that how does SDG connect to the current topic that we have presented related to population? And the connection to SDG is, as we have showed inside the presentation, toward the process of solving the population problems. There's always SDG within it that we will have to bear and carry along with. As we mentioned, on the low fertility and high mortality rate, SDG 3, 8, and 11 was involved. On the policies and culture, 5, 16, 17 was involved. And also on the third one, 8 and 11 was involved. We're not saying that we're looking forward to solve the SDGs, but instead, in the process of solving population problems and major problems that are going around in the world right now, including climate problems and different types of problems around the world, there's always SDG inside it and integrated into the problems that we're currently facing right now. And that is what we're trying to demonstrate, that in real world problems, SDG isn't just a something that the United Nations has made in order to make them look cool or make them look like they're doing something. It's actual implications and integrated into our society and the problems that we're currently facing. And as we're providing solutions for the population, we're also providing it for the SDGs.
Also, SDG is not a problem. It's rather a tool, and it's a field, and it's a perspective that we should have to look at diverse issues such as population declining, diverse worldwide issues. So we should look at the worldwide issues with SDG perspectives, such as we did, such as like using SDG 8, SDG 11, or SDG 3 to find a better solution to this problem and to meet the goals that UN and the SDG has, which is to make a better world. Thank you.
Furthermore, I would like to give an example of how a similar framework was used for what we suggested. The 2050 Paris Agreement was actually not made with the SDGs in mind, since it was passed roughly 2 months either before or after the SDGs were formed. Rather than having the SDGs at its core, the Paris Agreement actually works with it, but as a separate treaty. Thank you. And do we have any more questions? All right, that concludes our presentation. This was for today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Team 3, for analyzing demographics from this moment to 2050, leading to presenting suggestions and solutions for government and the populations as well. And also, I would like to take Team 4 to the stage, covering exploring the concept and the solution to climate change.
$8 billion people in 2000 years. 2.2 billion tons of trash every day. That's how severe our mankind is facing the climate change. And that's how severe our ocean waste management and pollution is. Hello, my name is Songyun.
Sungmin,
Sayan Kim.
Umi, Soyeon.
And we are here at Team 4 to explore the current situation of SDG 13 with a proposed solution. So before we start on with our proposed solution and status quo, we should update you with what is SG13? What's so important about it? SDG 13, the climate action is supposed to be telling you how severe our climate change is and how severe and how urgent our action matters with the scope of climate change. Our world is taking up every day, missing our chances to improve our future, missing our generation to fix the problems that we are currently facing and postponing it to the next generation that will go on. And history of SG13 starts all the way back in 1880, where the global temperature was terminal zero. But in 2012, the global temperature has increased by 0.85 degrees Celsius, which seems really unseen, but it has melted over 19 centimeters of icebergs and created a 19-centimeter raise in the ocean level. The next thing that we would like to highlight on is that the global emission of carbon dioxide has increased really rapidly, almost 50% from 1990s. The emissions grew quickly between the decades of 2000 and 2010 compared to the last 3 decades of 1970s and 2000, where it shows that our spend on pollution and our emission has increased with the development of our technologies.
I'll be discussing about general explanation of global warming and climate crisis. The temperature went up. Why? Because of industrial revolution. Before the industrial revolution happened, the human impact on climate change was relatively small. It was mainly natural climate changes. Energy consumption was mainly made of wind, water, and manpower, which is natural energy sources. In second industrial revolution happened when people started to using steam engines and fossil fuels a lot more. This caused a big increase in the amount of carbon dioxide going into the air, making pollution worse from factories and making climate changes. Britain started using a lot more coal from about the middle of 1800s and early 1900s. This was a big deal because it showed how much coal people were using all over the world. As more countries industrialized, they also needed more coals. This made a global market for coal. But burning coal made a lot of carbon dioxide, which made the earth hotter. This affected not only the countries burning the coal, but also other places all around the world. So using more coal during the time had been an effect on the environment and made climate change happen faster. And it wasn't just a problem for a country using the coal. During the second industrial revolution, the United Kingdom used a lot more coal. This was a big deal because coal became the main fuel for industry, cities, and transportation. All over the world, using so much coal causes a problem because burning it releases a lot of carbon dioxide, which makes global warming worse. This affects the environment and people a lot. The carbon dioxide doesn't stay in one place but spread all around the world, affecting natural weather and air quality everywhere. Cutting down trees also add to carbon dioxide problem, so it's really important to have policies to plant more trees and stop cutting down. This whole situation of using coal, trading globally, and harming the environment is why people are talking a lot of climate change today. This graph shows the killing carbon since the Industrial Revolution in 1750s. Therefore, our mankind has come up with a party to stop and act to the current effort for mankind, and it is COP.
COP, Conference of the Parties, is a crucial component of the global effort to address climate change. It is a series of annual meetings organized under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is an international treaty established to combat the adverse effects of climate change. There are three very important agreements made through this conference: the Kyoto Protocol, the Doha Amendment, and the Paris Agreement. The Kyoto Protocol, established in 1997 and enforced from 2005, is an international treaty addressing climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It places a greater responsibility on developed countries, recognizing their major contribution to current emission levels. The protocol, following the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities, sets binding emission reduction targets for 37 industrialized nations and the European Union on its Annex B. These targets aim for a 5% average reduction compared to 1990 levels over the first commitment period from 2008 to 2012. The Kyoto Protocol introduced three market-based mechanisms to help countries achieve their reduction targets cost-effectively. These are Clean Development Mechanism, Joint Implementation, and Emissions Trading. Clean Development Mechanism allows developed countries to invest in mitigation projects in developing countries and receive credit for reductions from them. Joint Implementation allows first and next countries to gain mitigation units by investing in mitigation projects in other developed countries. Emissions trading allows Annex 1 countries to buy and sell emissions permits to meet their reduction targets. After the first commitment period ended in 2012, to establish the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, covering the years 2013 to 2020, the Doha Amendment was adopted during the 18th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in Doha, Qatar in 2012. The second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, outlined in the Doha Amendment, set emission reduction targets for developed countries, but faced challenges. Developing nations had no reduction obligations, and key economies didn't join, prompting the need for the change due to the protocol's exclusive focus on developed countries. Accordingly, a new climate agreement was born at COP21, held in 2015, which is the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement, distinct from the Kyoto Protocol, strives for global inclusivity and flexibility. It introduces nationally determined contributions, where all nations contribute voluntarily, and involves developing countries in climate action. The agreement targets limiting the global temperature increase, prioritizing staying below 1.5 Celsius to avoid severe climate impacts. Recent concerns arise from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warnings about risk beyond 1.5 Celsius. To achieve this, greenhouse gas emissions must peak by 2025 and decrease by 43% by 2030. As the first binding commitment from all nations, the agreement aims to combat and adapt to climate change, crucially preventing severe. So, how does the Paris Agreement work? The Paris Agreement works on a 5-year cycle on increasingly ambitious climate action, or reaching up, carried out by countries. Since 2020, countries have been submitting their national climate action plans, known as nationally determined contributions. Each successive NDC is meant to reflect on an increasingly higher degree of ambition compared to the previous version. The mankind has worked hard along with SDGs, and I'll now pass to the innovative solutions.
So it is inevitable that it is clearly shown that our mankind has worked in creating innovative solutions in approach to solve the current climate change issue. And I will be explaining from how the mechanism of global climate change works and the proposed solution and how they can be useful in solving SDG 13. So first on, we need to know what mechanism of greenhouse gas effect has in order to solve the fundamental problem of climate change. So basically, as shown in the table above, the energy from sun warms the earth. That's how the basic mechanism works. Some escapes, some traps in the ozone layer. But however, an ozone layer is being destroyed by our human inputs such as plastics, pollutions, and emission of harmful gases. Those ozone layer are being destroyed and they're all trapped inside. The trapped heat leads to global warming that causes the temperature rise of the surface that we define as the climate change. So what's the overall effect of greenhouse gas in our atmosphere and why are they discussed so much times along with plastic and SDGs? It's simple to say that those atmosphere, because of the greenhouse gas effect and those greenhouse gas emissions from those plastics, thickens the atmosphere, weakens our ozone layer, and due to that, the gases and carbon dioxide, methane, ethylene are being trapped inside the atmosphere that's supposed to be letting go of. And since our Earth is heating up day by day, year by year, we need something to cool down. And that in our ecosystem was originally the water, the ocean. Our ocean played an important and massive role that included carbon absorption, heat absorption, and oxygen production. Our ocean, in fact, the coolant was absorbing around 25% of the world's total production of carbon dioxide, 90% of the general heat production, and was generating at least 50% of the whole Earth oxygen with its plankton. However, as climate change and global warming happens and progresses, it is now in a state to say that those reduced capacity rates are decreasing near zero. The once coolant that was cooling down our Earth are now being polluted by us. We're not being contaminated with plastics, greenhouse gases, and are now functioning no longer to cool ourselves down. And you might at this point wonder why I've been talking so much about plastic. Why does it matter so much? Because plastic itself is a really has a vast usage in our daily life, ranging from plastic bag, fishing nets, and all of the stuff that you sit in front definitely includes plastic at a certain extent. But plastic is not a good thing because of the fact that in every single cycle that plastic is being used, it creates greenhouse gas emission. Starting from production, it is being created from oil, fossil fuel, and throughout the process of fabrication, it emits carbon dioxide. Throughout the usage, of course, has the benefit of being able to be used in different ways, but after the usage is done, the disposal happens, and that's where the problem gets worse and worse. The disposal of plastic might seem like a really simple concept, just throwing it away to the ocean, burning it out. But what happens there is that the ocean plastic that are thrown away breaks down into microplastics and even nanoplastics to generate methane and ethylene and carbon dioxide, which are considered as one of the most harmful greenhouse gases that we know. And also that it also directly affects our ecosystem and food chain through micro and nanoplastics, where nanoplastics are eaten by the animals that we eat, are in the airs that we breathe, and are in every aspect of our life. And that's why our scientists one day decide to work out after Paris COP and SDG, decide to work on the fact that we need to stop this. We need to take actions. We need to be aware of what we have. So that's where the scientific solution came from, a biodegradable plastic. Biodegradable plastic is a chemically bonded form of plastic, which has no difference in terms of functioning, physical appearance, and aestheticness. But what's so different with it, with the traditional plastic? It's different because of the fact that it's made from natural resources, such as cassava and other things that can be made into polymers. Unlike the traditional plastic, it is less harmful and is also biodegradable, which only produces CO2, excluding methane and ethylene in the process of breaking down. This is an actual picture of the cassava plastic being used in our life, and it's only implemented in a certain part of the region that we live in. With this implementation, there are a lot of aspects to consider about, and I'll pass the political and law sides to my fellow teammate.
I'm going to explain why political matters when implementing with carbon tax as an example. A carbon tax is form of carbon pricing where a tax is imposed on the carbon content of fossil fuels. The main purpose is to encourage our society to reduce greenhouse gases by making fossil fuels more expensive. No one wants to buy expensive things, so carbon tax is using that. Governments implement carbon taxes as part of their efforts to address climate change and reduce the overall carbon footprint. After Kyoto Protocol in 2005, we can see that carbon emissions are decreasing. However, after implementing the carbon tax, we see the rates of decline accelerate. And the higher carbon tax imposed, the greater the amount and speed of reduction. That is, it decreases faster at $35 than $15 or $25. Through these two graphs, we know that carbon tax is effective to fossil fuels. We're also going to talk about natural gas. In case of natural gas, the graph looks a little more complicated than others. Before explaining why, I will talk about how coal and renewable energy are affected by the carbon tax. It can be seen that the application of carbon tax and coal works very efficiently, and the use of renewable energy increases when the carbon tax is applied. Natural gas increases because it is less carbon intensive and costs less than coal, making it a more economical way to reduce carbon emissions. We can see that the European Union is trying to apply carbon tax. It includes a cap and trade system and a carbon price to regulate sectors, for example, concrete or electricity. Through biodegradable plastic that he explained, and carbon taxes that I'm explaining, we know we need a combined solution that combining political, environmental, and scientific solutions all together. First thing is advanced technology. The example of advanced technology is a thing like artificial intelligence or big data analysis. Predicting the future after introducing carbon tax by using the AI can be one of the examples. And the second example can be the technology to create biodegradable plastic. And the second one, circular economy, is where resources are used more efficiently and waste is minimized and recycle processes are optimized. So they use renewable or recycled materials, which is related to biodegradable plastics, and make sustainable life cycles, and which is related to carbon tax. Nature-based solutions are needed to respond to climate change and enhance ecosystem resilience. And global collaboration is also very important. Climate change is a global problem, so working together is essential for effective and equitable climate action. Education and awareness is also very important. Reducing misinformation and its spread is important. For that, we need to provide people with clear data-based information and measures. But we found that simply using these alone would not lead to good solution. So she's going to talk about it.
So previous mention about scientific approach and political approach is sufficient to solve the problem, but I want to change the point of view. So I found that one example which approach sociologically to solve climate change. Climate action highlights a concerning trend in the worsening climate emergency. Extreme heat drive positive feedback loops resulting in increased energy consumption, higher CO2 emissions, and the cycle of rising temperatures. So we can say that once we are on a treadmill, there's no way off. Heat waves often go unnoticed, especially when they affect vulnerable peoples, such as the elderly and the poor. In the past, social factors received no attention in crucial part of the report. For example, the report which called Why Heat Can Be Fatal explains simply the link between human physiology and environment. It argues that when body temperature rises enough above the normal range, heat injury occurs. So we need to explain more about this. And to replenish this, after a devastating heat wave in Chicago, CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention that study, identified the key risk factors for heat-related deaths: the lack of daily mobility, medical issues, and absence of air conditioning or social contacts, and especially the isolation can increase vulnerability. The study's findings have influences public health strategies in U.S. cities facing frequent heat waves. So we can see that highest heat-related death rates and highest percentage of aged person living alone is really overlapped in that map. So furthermore, spatial analysis of the 1995 Chicago disaster revealed a local pattern of higher death rates in areas with concentrated African American populations. Factors such as violent crime and a high proportion of elderly residents are correlated with increased heat-related mortality. However, I wanted to point out that subsequent discussion and policies largely overlook place-based risks. So when focuses on place-based risk, you can compare to similar areas, which is North Lawndale and Little Village. I found that disparities in heat-related death rates were highlighted despite they have similar demographics. It's important to note that poverty and crime, and importantly, social isolation play distinct roles. To explain the variance in death rates between African American and Latinos, we consider cultural arguments. This argument suggests that Latino strong family ties may play a role. We also found that local social environments significantly impacted the vulnerability of older residents. Little villages, vibrant cities, promoting social engagement, contrast with North Lawndale, challenging environment worked by abandoned buildings and high crime rates. So understanding this dynamic is really important for effective climate change action and personalized public health strategies. So social solidarity is needed. I would like to emphasize that all phenomena are fundamentally social and require sociological approach in order to truly solve them.
In role for youth and the SDG is critical thinkers, leaders, innovators, change makers, communicators.
And in this presentation, I want you to take one lesson, is that the action current that we're taking are not the ones that for us right now, but it's going to be for the ones that comes ahead of us. The action right now is urgent, but yet we're not taking any actions, even though they're innovative solutions from scientific, sociology, and law. It is time to take actions, time to make changes and save the world. In fact, it was the first year that UN has ever experienced a crisis near death with climate changes, and it shows how severe our actions are causing the environment changes. I would like to end up this presentation with one quote that says, "Be the change you want to see in the world. Do not wait for it to come, just go for it." Thank you. Questions?
Hi, thank you for your wonderful presentation. I really like a lot of contents that you guys put out. I just wanted to ask about the scientific research that you have mentioned, especially like biodegradable plastic and those types of scientific enhancements that allows environmentally friendly technologies integrated into our daily life so that there is no plastic pollution. Because since those types of inventions are usually a lot more costly and it is inevitably much more higher in cost compared to normal plastic bags and other normal life that we use in the current status quo. How are you going to implement those things into our lifestyle? Are you going to persuade companies to use those types of technology? And how are you going to persuade them, since it is much higher in cost and it's probably going to be really hard to convince them to use something that costs more?
Okay, understand your perspective. I know that there were innovative solutions from decades ago where it could have been implemented, but the reason for lack of motivation was that they were not seeing active changes in climate change. For instance, this year was the first year that UN has rescued thousands of people due to climate changes. And also because of the fact that in 2100, we're expected to have habitat loss, marine pollutions, and raising sea levels. So it's rather we kind of pay more to save our lives as a whole mankind, or just not to take any actions or just die out. So to give choices to the private sectors and those governments, it is essential to appeal that our world is in danger. To support that, we have data and we have solutions. So the only thing we can do at this point for implementation is just to persuade and advise, just like UNG does to other security councils.
So, thank you for your presentation. I want to ask about biodegradable plastics. From what I know, they're just plastics that degrade faster, and it's made out of biological material. But aren't they just basically plastic? And they still contain a lot of carbon, and which can let out carbon into the atmosphere. And also, to make biodegradable plastic, there has to be a specialized facility to build a biodegradable plastic. And wouldn't that just increase the total carbon emission than the traditional method?
What you're forgetting in this mention is that the presence of ethylene and methane during the disposal and the creation of traditional plastic. So you just said that biologically that it just contains carbon, and I just understand your perspective, but the carbon itself, we already have a proposed solution. We already are capable of getting rid of carbons, which is carbon filter that has been proposed by different scientists around the world decades ago. It's just the time of implementation. And also, regarding the matter that you just asked about building facilities and the initial carbon emissions that we might face, those carbon emissions could be fixed through carbon filters. They're always the steep money or steep carbon or at a cost that we'll have to pay for the better innovative and revolution that we need to face in order to save our mankind.
Okay, thank you for your wonderful presentation and your ideas. I really liked it, and I was going to ask a question about like academical thing about like plastic and economics, but actually now I'm curious about how you guys like got this like result as of like a team, because this is a team project, and one important thing is about teamwork and how like each members of the team has like participated and like engaged to create this beautiful presentation. I want to ask like what was like how each of your like unique perspectives has came into this result.
So what's really interesting is the process and the time that we took just to decide our parts and how we were going to integrate. So just because of the fact that we're given 5 days and we just spent 1 day deciding which part we're gonna do, shows that we really possess a unique perspectives towards the SDG 13 issues and the environmental issues that our interest lies on. For instance, her interest lies in sociology, and their interests are laws and politics, and my interest is scientific. We've all combined to come out with 5 combined solutions, which consists of biodegradable plastic, sociology campaign, and also the law implementation, and along with the historical implementations to learn from history as history repeats itself. So I believe that in terms of cooperating with other teammates and getting ensuring their participation, we've done a really a phenomenal job, and also including their perspectives as all of their idea was in the presentation.
I really saw that. Thank you.
Thank you. No more questions, and we'll end the presentation here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much everyone for having time and effort on making this presentation available. And before we conclude, I would like to apologize for the unsmooth showcase in Zoom or YouTube for the unstable video and audio deliveries. I sincerely hope today's presentation was an opportunity for all to have reaffirm the commitment on the global agenda, especially the sustainable development goals. Thank you everyone listening to the presentation.